Good evening and welcome. This morning, as I was opening up the PowerPoint on my computer to review it, electricity went out at my house. It stayed off for about 3.5 hours. During that time, I felt so powerless. And I don't mean this as a joke, even though the word usage is kind of funny. What struck me as I pondered how I was going to manage the day with an important Zoom meeting and preparing for this talk, I couldn't help but see the irony. I hadn't fully charged my iPhone or iPad, and I hadn't printed out either the presentation or my notes. Everything was sitting dead on my computer. In other words, I had not prepared myself for the possibility of losing electricity on this very important day. Fortunately, the power came back on and let me off the hook. A potentially serious drought approaches. Let's restore our power by preparing and taking action to reduce water in the landscape. I'm going to give you lots of strategies to do so. Hopefully, this will allow us to maintain the privilege to grow our own food and have beautiful gardens that feed our souls. At the end of this talk, you'll understand the importance of reducing the water used in your landscape. You'll also know that there are several readily available alternative water sources, alternative sources for water in the landscape. And you'll be able to choose any or all of 5 simple water reduction strategies and implement them right away in your own landscape. We've got 2 handouts for you. One with the resources I mentioned in the talk and much more, and one with a checklist for the irrigation strategies that I'll cover later. If you've attended any of our previous talks, you've seen this graphic. I'll give a slightly different spin on this in saying that in the absence of any of these essential elements, plants would not thrive in our gardens. Indeed, plants would not thrive anywhere, nor would they, or even we, exist on this planet. Oxygen plus water equals life. Life which is hosted by the soil and sustained by processes driven by the energy of the sun. To nurture a garden is to participate in the miracle of life. Well, our old friend, Mr. Drought, is back. He's like that friend that comes to stay for a few days and just can't seem to move on. As a landscape water manager, I track drought and rainfall statistics very closely. In this slide, I show the drought patterns from 2001 to 2021. This is from the Drought Monitor website produced by University of Nebraska-Lincoln. The way the color coding goes is that white is not dry, yellow is abnormally dry, beige is moderate drought, orange is severe drought, and red is extreme drought, and brown is exceptional drought. Now, if you look at this closely, you'll see that in only 5 of these 21 years were we not in drought. So we've got these 2 years here, these 2 years down here, and 2017 that we were not in drought. So in 16 of 21 years in this century, we have been in drought. That's 76% of the time. Some people like to say that droughts are cyclical in California. This doesn't look very cyclical to me. Droughts are a part of life in California, and it looks like they're here to stay. This is the latest profile that I pulled down from the Drought Monitor website. And what it says is that as of July 6th, the 85% of California is in stage 4 extreme drought, and 33% is in stage 5 exceptional drought, and the Bay Area is stage 5. And on May 10th, Governor Newsom declared drought emergency in 41 of 58 counties in California. Are you plagued with high water bills? Even if you aren't, water prices are rising. And a good thing to remember is that for most water service providers, you're charged for the water coming into the property and the water leaving the property in the form of sewer charges. Now, different water districts handle it differently, so you should contact your water district and see how they charge you for the water leaving the property. But you do get charged for both. So don't just look at your water bills, look at your sewer charges as well. Even water used in the landscape in residential accounts is assumed to have been discharged into the wastewater treatment system. This is because for residential accounts, there's only one way to measure the water use on the landscape, and that's that mixed use meter that's out on the street. So if your landscape is consuming an inappropriate amount of water, you're paying needless fees for water treatment. Reducing the amount of potable water used in the landscape will help with this. I'll be showing you ways to achieve that. Are your plants dying or just sitting there languishing, seeming not to be able to decide whether they want to stick around or not? Sometimes this is because of the wrong plants put in the wrong place, but often it's about the water. They say that the majority of plant issues are due to watering, either overwatering or underwatering. In my experience, it's overwatering. Speaking of watering, let me take a sip. Or you could have an irrigation system that just doesn't perform adequately. So dying or languishing plants and or badly functioning irrigation systems might be big players in your garden. Are you concerned about impending water restrictions? In the last drought, Bay Area cities and water districts imposed limited days and hours for irrigation. We can expect more of the same this time. Some of those restrictions were never lifted when the drought was over. Since we're headed into a drought situation this year that could possibly surpass the 2015 drought, we need to proactively drought-proof our landscapes now to lower the water requirement as much as possible. That way, when these restrictions come down the pike, the landscape will be as ready as it can be. By the way, this is a very recent photo of Lake Oroville. Those houseboats are going to sit out the drought and wait for the water to return. One way to reduce the amount of water we use in the landscape is to use alternative water sources to irrigate your landscape. Now, this first alternative water source is you need to live in central Contra Costa County to take advantage of this. You need to be a customer of the Central Contra Costa Sanitary District. And this is a really cool program. They just give you free recycled water. So you can just drive to their Martinez site with your containers and fill them up and drive off. And there you have water for your landscape, free water for your landscape. And Greg did inform me that you need to bring containers that can be sealed. so that you can't just bring buckets and barrels and stuff like that. Buckets and open garbage cans and things like that. Now, this is just for central Contra Costa County, but I do know research did on East Bay Mud's website, and they are actually planning to do this as well, and they're working all the logistics and kinks out of it, and they hope to have their recycled water filling station up and running pretty soon. So that's very promising. Another alternative water source is greywater. The easiest one to implement, of course, is that warm-up water that you get as you're waiting for your kitchen sink water to warm up, or your shower to warm up, or bathtub, or any of the faucets that you have inside the house. That warm-up water can just go out and water the plants. I know that a lot of us started doing that in this last drought, or even the drought before that, and are still doing it. Now, this greywater solution that I have pictured here is the laundry to landscape greywater solution. And this is relatively easy to implement. It takes some pretty simple and specialized parts, and the irrigation stores, a lot of the irrigation stores actually carry kits that you can buy to convert the washing machine to reroute the water that normally goes to the sewer system, reroute that out to the landscape. And this works really nicely for trees and shrubs. That's mainly what we like to direct this toward. We don't use greywater to water our vegetable gardens, but for trees and shrubs, it works out really nicely. And there in my resources handout, I give some resources, some really good resources of people who teach how to do this and have all kinds of workshops and things on their website to direct you. Okay, so for this next alternative water source, what I'd like to do is just give you a water cycle / watershed 101 to introduce the next alternative method. And so the water cycle it's just water cycling from its liquid to its gaseous to its precipitous, like rain or snow form. And they say that the amount of water that's on the earth today is the same amount of water that was here eons ago, and it just changes form and moves around the earth. So talking about this water cycle, if we start at the ocean or a body of water, then the water evaporates, goes from liquid form to gaseous form, evaporates, and then condenses into clouds and falls back down to the earth in the form of precipitation, which is rain or snow. And also, so when we talk about water leaving the earth, the earth or bodies of water, it either leaves in the form of evaporation, turning from liquid to gas, or it leaves in the form of transpiration, which is the plants actually using the water. So the water going from liquid to gas form through the plants actually using the water. So then when the water falls back to the earth, if it falls to a high elevation, then it either percolates, some of it percolates down into the water table, and some of it runs off down the mountain and ultimately ends up back in that body of water. So we have this cycle that just keeps on happening. So this third alternative water source is rainwater harvesting. Using the watershed approach to landscaping. Now notice that I'm not showing rain barrels or cisterns here. Those are definitely a viable option. But this is about using the landscape itself to store the water. I'm talking about sculpting and shaping the landscape in such a way as to use the landscape to capture the rainwater. Dry riverbeds and rain gardens are not only aesthetically pleasing, but they're also functional parts of the landscape that aid in using that free water that falls from the sky to keep the plants happy and thriving. Now, so the challenge here is to figure out how to hold on to that water, because the water is falling during a season when we don't really need it. So the challenge is to figure out how to hold on to it. And part of that solution is the sculpting of the land to hold it. All right, now I have another slide that illustrates this as well. So this slide really graphically illustrates how the water, it either hits the landscape or it hits the roof. And the roof can be considered, so this can be considered a watershed, just a site, a property that is its own individual watershed, where the water hits the roof of the structure, and that can be like the mountains. And then the rain gutters are the rivers and streams that let the water run down. And then the landscape is the aquifers. So this shows really nicely how when the landscape is sculpted, then it can actually hold on to that water. And there has been legislation that has been passed within the past 10 or 12 years that is now requiring for new construction that when rainwater falls on the site, we have to keep that water on the site. Whereas in the past, what we did as quickly as possible was get that water from the rain gutters and the downspouts out to the curb, to the storm drains, and ultimately into the waterways. But this legislation has occurred because that practice is polluting our waterways big time. So now it is required for new construction, especially, that the water that falls on the property stays on the property. And this is a really good thing because we can use our property as let me give you a direct quote from the place that I got this graphic. Healthy living soil captures and holds on to rainwater. When downspouts are directed to these landscapes, living soil becomes a giant sponge that helps keep plants healthy and happy, whether it's raining or we're in a drought. Capturing and holding on to rainfall from the roof and adjacent hard surfaces helps prepare your garden for the long, dry summer and reduces irrigation demand. There's a cute little saying that they like to say, and that's slow it, spread it, sink it, store it. So figuring out how to hold on to that water in one way is sculpting the land, and another way is to have regular compost and mulching practices to hold that water in. And I'll be getting into that a little bit more later. Now, this is the last alternative source of water, and it's low water plants. So you might say, how can plants be a source of water? Low water plants, alternative source of water? Well, water districts like to say that their water conservation programs are a source of water for them. And this is because their water conservation programs preserve the water. And so I added low water plants to this as an alternative water source because In California, low water plants are climate appropriate plants, and they are adapted to this summer dry climate. And once they're established, depending on where you live, once they're established, they need very little or no irrigation during the dry season. So this particular, and I'll really illustrate this a little bit later, but this particular resource here is from Contra Costa Water District's website, where they have really great lists and plant lists for low water plants and photos and all of that. Great recommendations. And East Bay Mud's website also provides plant lists. Now, if you're anywhere within reach of the Richmond Civic Center, please come and check out our Master Gardener low water demonstration garden. We call it the Richmond Dry Garden. And we've been working on this quarter-acre, we, Master Gardeners, Contra Costa Master Gardeners, have been working on this quarter-acre garden in partnership with East Bay Mud and the city of Richmond since early 2018. We have our work days every Friday from 9:30 to 12:30 p.m. So drop by and say hello. We'll be happy to give you a tour. This garden demonstrates that low water gardens can not only be stunning, but functional in that they require little or no water during the dry season once the plants are established. And over here on the west side of the county, I know that for, I think about a year and a half, this garden had no irrigation at all. And it had a lot of established plants in it that did just fine. They just absolutely thrived. And they had zero irrigation for the whole year. They just lived off the rainfall. So they proved to us during that time that low water plants on the west side of the county can truly exist just fine with no water. Now, we've got mulch, pretty thick mulch on it, but I'll be talking about that a little bit later. So here's some eye candy for you. This is the native section of the garden. This area was planted just before COVID hit last year. And we recently finished planting the Mediterranean area and plan to plant the habitat area next month. All right. Well, conveniently, the water requirement of plants is expressed in inches, just like rainfall is. Now, this chart compares the amount of rain that has fallen in West Contra Costa County each water year between 2007 and 2020. And this is the rainfall in inches. The blue bars are the rainfall in inches for Richmond. So I've collected this really, I live in Richmond, so I've collected this for my own purposes and for the purposes of demonstration during talks. So this is the amount of water in inches that has fallen in these water years. Now, a water year runs from October 1st to September 30th. So right now we're in the 2020 water year. Now, what this chart is meant to illustrate is that the amount of rainfall that we get, even in these 14 years where we had small amounts of rainfall. Now, I should tell you that the average rainfall for this area used to be 25 inches of rain a year. So only in two of these 13 years did we even get close to that. but that used to be the average rainfall. Now, so here's how this graphic works. The high water use plants are the red line, and that red line represents the annual water requirement for high water use plants in this area. And some examples of high water use plants: turf, redwoods, birches, some dogwoods, etc. Then we can see that the rainfall in none of these years would have supported high water use plants. 2018 almost got there. So then the next level that we have is moderate water use plants, and that's the orange line. The orange line represents the annual water requirement for moderate water use plants. And we can see that the rainfall in almost 3 years of these 13 years was enough to have provided the water for moderate water use plants. And some examples of moderate water use plants are maple trees, magnolias, citrus, most roses. And in fact, many, many common landscape plants are moderate water use plants. So then it really starts getting interesting when we get down to this green line and the purple line. Now, the green line represents just basic low water plants. And that is Mediterranean plants, native plants, lavenders, figs, acacias, salvias, rock roses. There are just tons of them. Now, the green line represents the annual water requirement in inches of low water plants. And we can see that in almost all of these 13 years, there was enough rain that had fallen to support the low water plants. And this should be obvious because California is a dry state. And so climate appropriate plants are low and very low water plants. So then now we have the purple line, and that's the most interesting one to me. The purple line represents low water plants that have a minimum of 1 inch of mulch spread on the soil. And this comes from a study done by Texas A&M University, where they found that 1 inch of mulch spread onto a planted area will lower the plant water requirement of those plants by 25%. So 1 inch of mulch, 25% less water. So we can see that the water requirement of low water plants with mulch is just so super low. So we can see that it is very climate appropriate and can, in fact, survive through droughts and years where the rainfall is much less than the average. Now I'm going to give you 5 strategies that I consider relatively quick and easy to implement. Every one of these will reap instant benefits in reducing water use in the landscape. So here's a buffet of strategies that will give you instant results in reducing water use in the landscape. Pick one or all of them and enjoy the results. Reduce run times on all irrigation zones by 10%. Spread 3 inches of mulch on planted areas. Replace inefficient sprinkler nozzles with efficient ones. Create monthly irrigation schedules. And perform an irrigation inspection. Okay, strategy number 1, reduce run times by 10%. Now, I know that for the state that Governor Newsom has requested that we lower our water use by 15%. And our water districts in Contra Costa County, East Bay Mud and Contra Costa Water District, are asking for a 10% volunteer cutback in water use in our landscapes. So I've geared this slide to 10%. I certainly invite you to go to 15% or even 20%. Because as I said earlier, in my experience, people overwater their landscapes. And so you probably could reduce it by 20%. Now, this recommendation is not for those of you who have irrigation controllers and you're on it and you're watching the weather and you're making sure that you're adjusting the irrigation controller as the weather changes and with the seasons and time and all of that. So this recommendation is not really for you. And it's not for you if you have a smart controller. You don't need to do that. So because smart controllers hopefully are applying the minimum amount of water to the landscape, no more and no less to the landscape, and just really nailing it. So this is for those of you who are not on it and nailing it, is just to go out to the irrigation controller, and for every 10 minutes of runtime on each of your irrigation zones, cut it back by 1 minute or 2 minutes, whatever you would like. Now, this will instantly cut down on your irrigation water use by, in this case, 10%. So it's a quick and dirty and easy way to lower your water use. Now, they say that 50% of the water that's used on properties that have gardens, that have landscapes, 50% of the water that's consumed on a property with landscapes is used in the landscape. So 50% is used indoors and 50% used outdoors. I have experience with lots of residential sites that use way, way more than 50%. So if you were to just go out to your controller, if you're one of those people whose landscapes is so big that it does consume most of the water that comes into your landscape, and doing something like this, going out to the controller and just reducing the runtime, will reap big rewards very quickly. All right, so strategy number 2 is to spread 3 inches of mulch onto the planted areas. Mulch offers multiple benefits to the plants and to the organisms living in the soil. It cuts down on the amount of water lost to evaporation. I remember earlier I told you that in that Texas A&M study that only 1 inch of mulch lowers the plant requirement by 25%. So it cuts down on the water loss to evaporation. It regulates soil temperature, and it provides food for the plants and soil organisms as they break the mulch down. So do make sure that the irrigation is applied underneath the mulch and not on top of it. So we don't want to have overhead irrigation in mulched areas, because studies show that the mulch will absorb 25% of that water that's sprayed onto the mulch, and that 25% of the water never makes it to the soil. So we want to apply the water underneath the mulch, not on top of it. Now Greg provided this to me, and this is really interesting, and it's a very interesting demonstration of how mulch modulates the soil temperature. So he took the temperature with to some kind of thermometer. I forget the name. infrared thermometer on an 88-degree day at our garden in Walnut Creek. And they use straw as their mulch at our garden. And what he found in checking several of the beds with the infrared thermometer was that the straw surface varied from 99 to 118 degrees. Bare ground reached as high as 132 degrees Fahrenheit. And keep in mind that you're killing off the microorganisms at 140 degrees Fahrenheit. But the soil under the mulched areas was a consistent 74 to 76 degrees Fahrenheit. So now remember, this was an 88-degree day. So this is maintaining that consistent soil temperature also makes it easier to maintain a consistent moisture level. This is particularly valuable, he says, for the growth and development of many vegetables and to ward off diseases. Okay, so strategy number 3 is to replace inefficient sprinkler nozzles with efficient ones. Now, what we have here is the top line of the sprinklers or sprinkler nozzles is efficient nozzles or sprinklers, and the bottom line is inefficient. Now, if you have this one in the bottom left, the fixed spray sprinkler, this is really inefficient because it applies water at a rate that the soil cannot absorb it, cannot accept it. So the water runs off really easily with this fixed spray sprinkler. It just blasts the water. And with these clay soils that we have in our county, mostly clay soils, there are some areas with sand and sandy loam, but it's mostly clay soils. That water just wants to run off, and that is a really inefficient practice. So just by virtue of unscrewing the top nozzle from that fixed spray sprinkler and screwing in one of these top 2 left nozzles, you will increase the uniformity and the efficiency of that sprinkler by 20%. And the reason I have a hard and fast number on that is because I've done sprinkler audits on fixed spray sprinklers before, and then just changed out the nozzles to the efficient ones, the rotary nozzles. That's what these 2 are, this top row 2 here, rotary nozzles. We changed them out, did another audit, and the efficiency number, the distribution uniformity, was 20% higher. And we did this 3 or 4 times. So we know that just by virtue of changing out sprinkler nozzles, you can raise the efficiency by 20%. We call this the low-hanging fruit of water efficiency because it's so easy to do. And then 20% more efficient means it needs 20% less water applied. So that is a really good thing. Now, if you have these brass sprinklers, these are really, really inefficient. I would just change those out wholesale. I just take them out and put in pop-up sprinklers and put in the efficient pop-up sprinklers. Because these brass ones, they just pop up about an inch, and anything that they're watering will get blocked because there is very little plant material that will grow under an inch. And then we have the impact sprinklers, which are inefficient, which can be replaced by these single stream rotors in this top row. These are both, the impact and single stream are long range sprinklers. So impact, inefficient, single stream rotor, efficient. Oh, right. Now this screenshot is from a video that, from a series of videos that we did back in the last drought. And I put the link in the resource handout, and it's a series of videos that that we made, very short videos, just a few minutes long, that we made on how to handle landscapes in drought. So you might want to check out some of those videos. And this is a screenshot from one of them showing how easy it is to just change out, unscrew the nozzle. And the inefficient nozzle is right here on the grass, and the efficient one is the one with the long white filter attached to it. And then you just pop that in and screw it on. Easy schmeezy. All right, strategy. Oh, and actually, let me go back here. I do like to recommend to people that you go to the professional irrigation stores to get these parts, because they can help you with that. They can make sure that you get the right nozzles. And so, you walk into the box stores at Home Depot or Lowe's, and you just have these thousands of parts staring at you, and you don't know which ones to choose and which ones are the right ones. But at the professional irrigation stores, the guys and gals that work in those stores are there to help you with that. So I'd love to recommend that you patronize them. All right, strategy number 4 is adjust the irrigation schedule monthly. Okay. Now this chart is now we've got two things going on here. We have the blue bars, which are the water requirement this is actually the water requirement of cool season turf grass. So cool season turf grass is the lawn. It's the turf grass that we use in lawns in most Northern California sites. That is our turf grass of choice, is cool season turf grass. So these blue bars are the water requirement, the monthly water requirement in inches of cool season turf grass. And in this case, we're talking about Antioch. So I took an example city that's in the east part of our county now. And then the red bars indicate common irrigation scheduling practices. And a really common practice that people do, even landscape professionals, so homeowners, landscape professionals alike, they do this. In June or July, when it's really, really hot, they put in that, what we call peak schedule. Peak schedule is for the hottest time of year. Anytime you hear that term peak schedule, it usually means July. So this is really great timing for this webinar because we're in peak right now. So you would be putting in the irrigation schedule that is the highest 100% irrigation schedule that you'll ever have. Every other month other than this month will be lower than that. So a common practice is to put in that peak schedule, that hotter than Hades schedule, and then leave it into August, into September, and sometimes all the way through October until we start getting rain and until we start getting reliable rain, and then people just turn off their controllers from there. Now, see, the problem with that is that the water requirement after July goes down, and you can see this curve here. July is 100%, coming down August, down September, down October. So the water requirement is lower, 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 but the water being applied is still this 100% hotter than Hades schedule. So a lot of water is being wasted in this practice. So what I'm recommending here is that you find out what those percentages are supposed to be, and it's actually in the next slide. I'll provide that. But we do want to, the substantiation for putting in this hot schedule and leaving it for 4 months is that people say, Oh, well, we have 100+ degree days in August, September, and October. And yes, we do have 100+ degree days, but the water requirement of plants is not dependent so much on air temperature. It's more dependent on solar radiation, which is sunlight. So as the days get shorter and the sun's trajectory lowers in the sky, the water requirement goes down and down and down. So you should, even though you have 100+ degree day, it doesn't mean that you have to put in that July schedule. So then now going on to the next slide. Now I have examples of what those percentages should be in different areas of Contra Costa County. So I've chosen 3 representative cities in East, West, and Central County: Antioch, Richmond, and Walnut Creek. Now, most modern irrigation controllers have what they call a percent adjust feature. So what you would do in that case is you put in a peak schedule, and then for all of the months, so you would adjust this monthly, you go out to your controller monthly, and July is 100%. August for Antioch is going to be 87%. So you would program in 87%. In Richmond, it'll be 92%, and in Walnut Creek, 87%. So then what happens is the irrigation controller takes the runtime for each of those zones and lowers it based on that percentage. So it lowers the runtime. Now, these are just 3 cities in Contra Costa County. I know there are a lot of people on this webinar who don't live in Contra Costa County. I provided in the resource handout a percent adjust resource for the whole state of California, for every incorporated city in California. So you can get that off of the handout if you don't live in Contra Costa County. But this is really important. This will save you tons of water. And especially now, since we're heading into that time where we should be adjusting it down. Okay, strategy number 5. This is the last strategy. Perform an irrigation inspection. Now, I told you I had 2 handouts for you. The second handout is the irrigation checklist for doing this irrigation inspection. And we have a checklist for sprinklers and a checklist for drip. And then the second page of this handout actually lists these 5 strategies and gives guidance and some notes for making it happen. All right, so inspect the irrigation. And let me just go down here and catch up. So what you want to do when you inspect your irrigation is you want to turn on each zone one at a time and walk the area, look and listen for issues. All right. Now with sprinklers, it's easy to just look for issues. And with drip, you really need to listen, especially if you've got your drip covered up with mulch. So some of the things you want to look for in a sprinkler system, and this is on the checklist on the handout: mismatched sprinkler zones with sprinklers or overhead type of spray and drip in the same zone. We always want to shoot for uniformity. So don't put sprinklers and drip in the same zone, or don't combine different kinds of devices in the same zone. That is a recipe for a huge water waste. You want to look for sprinklers that are blocked by plants and cut away the plants, sprinkler heads that have sunken too low, sprinkler heads that are tilted, sprinkler clogged or broken sprinkler nozzles, sprinklers spraying onto sidewalks, driveways, or the street, misting due to high pressure. We always want to watch for that. We've all seen that. The water atomizes when it's misting and it just flies away. It doesn't land on its intended target, and a lot of water gets wasted that way. Different types of sprinklers in the same zone. Try to stay uniform with sprinklers. And for drip, things to look for are kinked, pierced, or sliced tubing, too few or too many emitters on one plant, missing, broken, or clogged emitters, mismatched emission devices. So still here with drip, we want to go with uniformity. We want things to be uniform. We don't want to mismatch the emission devices. Check for adequate output from the emitters. Check for animals chewing on the tubing. And we had a question earlier where I recommended that you cover that tubing with mulch and provide some water in the garden for the animals, because it's the water they're after. And then check for parts blowing off because of high pressure. All right. So who can assist you with water efficiency? The very first ones that I would recommend are the professional irrigation stores. And Contra Costa County is abundant, totally abundant in professional irrigation stores. I think there are 7 of them that I've listed in the resources sheet. Water districts, East Bay Mud and Contra Costa Water District. They have rebate programs. They have many other resources on their websites. Both of them have a treasure trove of information on their websites. And then last, I'd like to recommend Stop Waste, stopwaste.org. It's actually in Alameda County, but their website is really, it's a treasure trove too. They have lawn replacement workshops, sheet mulching workshops that they sponsor, and lots of resources. All right. So this is my last slide. So you know how important it is to reduce your water use in the landscape. And you know there are other choices than the standard turn on the tap sources for water in the landscape. And you have a choice of 5 fairly simple strategies for lowering water use in your landscape. So I hope you're ready to take action. The really cool thing about these strategies is that you'll lower your water bills, your plants will be healthier, and you'll be more able to comply with any drought restrictions that come down the pike in this very dry year. So everybody wins. It doesn't get any better than that. I believe you didn't come to this webinar to take notes. I believe you came to take action. So here we go, game on. I thank you for even the smallest action you take. Your landscape will thank you, and our diminishing water supply will surely thank you.